The following is a presentation of Team Bonding, providing more than 100 live, virtual, or hybrid corporate team building activities for companies around the world. Visit teambonding.com to schedule your event now.
Hello, team. My name is Rich Rinnensland, and I'm welcoming you to Team Building Around the World, the podcast where I speak to people from the team bonding, team building industry from all over the globe. Today, I am very excited to have with me Mr. Guy Baker, the CEO of Catalyst Global. You'll hear the compelling story of how he built a team-building empire. But before we get to Guy, this show is supported by Catalyst Team Building Network. Find out more about the world's largest network of team-building providers at catalystglobal.com. I'd also like to thank our friends at B1G1, which can make your business a real force for good. Visit b1g1.com to get started. Now, team, in the early 1980s, Catalyst Global CEO Guy Baker started a small team-building company in the UK. At the time, corporate team-building exercises were tired, hackneyed events, seemingly all from a limited imagination of a small cadre of alpha males. Guy's team broke every mold imaginable, creating dynamic activities that were inclusive, creative, sometimes even wacky. Now, Mr. Baker's team-building community sports 50 partners in 90 countries. And welcome to Team Building Around the World, Mr. Guy Baker, everybody. Say hello to him. That's actually just a small group of supporters happily hiding under my desk, Guy. That's all they were. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming and joining us on the show here, Guy. And I'm very excited to have you. Can you tell everybody, not only who you are, but where you are right now?
Okay, right now I'm sat in a beautiful cabin which serves as our office down here in New Zealand, a little town called Nelson, which is on the South Island. I moved here about 3 or 4 years ago. Prior to that, I was living in Australia, and hopefully you can detect enough of my English accent still left behind to prove that I'm what they call here a POM, or somebody who originally came from the UK.
Excellent.
So, and it was nice to hear you sum up. It's always, when you hear someone's life being summarized in 2 minutes, there you go. Wow, did I really achieve all that? I keep pinching myself. It's been a journey that's flashed by, as you say. Sort of, I'd like to correct one thing there. I'd like to say it was the mid '80s to late '80s. Otherwise, I think I'd be getting on a bit here. So, yeah, I was in the college in London in the early '80s. I did communications, so my background has always been in how people communicate one way or another. So that's how it all started.
So what actually made you decide that you were going to completely redesign team bonding and team building in your own way?
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I was in London. I actually stayed in London for 10 years doing a postgrad and living in London. And I actually saw a film, I think it was called Roxanne, one of the American movies.
Steve Martin. Yes, Daryl Hannah.
That's it, yeah. And
one of my favorites.
I think he's got a really big nose in that movie.
He does, yes.
Right? He's a fireman with a big nose. and I just saw him living in this lovely place. That's funny now because I'm living in that lovely place. But at that time I was living in London thinking why am I doing this job in London when I could be doing something similar in a nicer place? So my first thing was to get out of London. And I moved north to Cumbria, which is in the north of England on the borders with Scotland.
Sure.
And Cumbria was really the sort of the birthplace of traditional English team building using army command tasks. So that's the birthplace of, for example, Outward Bound. Outward Bound, the company Outward Bound was actually that's where they started. They went into they were around the world now. And so I moved up there, and when I started, I was at something called Now Get Out of That, which was a very short TV series, one of the first reality shows, actually, because people were put into tricky situations, which as a team of people, they had to work their way out of. So with my background in communications, I was observing people acting as teams, and I was thinking, wow, this is pretty interesting. You're putting people into a short space of time where a lot can happen. It's a bit like Lord of the Flies. You put 6 boys on an island, lots going to happen. If you put 5, 6 people together in a team, give them a problem to solve, a lot's going to happen in that time. So I guess it was from a couple of years of observation. That's where that comment about the alpha male is correct, because what was happening consistently in those teams was the alpha male would sort of dominate. He would sort of rule the roost, And his opinion would be, but I was watching teams over a period of years, and I was seeing that wasn't the success route. The teams that were successful were teams which gave everyone a voice, people who were prepared to listen. Now in this day of COVID-19, with all these Zoom meetings, and that's gone full circle. I think the power of listening is one of the most important attributes that people perhaps have.
Wow. So what does that look like, Guy? I mean,
I think I can do this better. And I'm going to break two rules here. One, I'm going to take people away from having to come to the Lake District in Cumbria. So it wasn't going to be location specific. I was going to take the challenges to conference hotels. May seem hard to believe, but in the mid 80s, that was actually the start of hotels developing space for conferences. I mean, in the 70s, people went and stayed in hotels for work or for pleasure. But they weren't actually. The conference industry isn't that old. I mean, but those of us that have got older, we've actually grown up with the growth of the conference industry, and it was that conference industry and meetings and planning industry that we plugged into. So we were able to go anywhere in the UK and deliver events and make people feel that they were in the great outdoors of Cumbria, but they weren't. They were actually in the gardens and grounds of the conference hotel.
Very nice. Now let's talk a little bit more about the changing the actual pattern of way that team building events go. You must have faced some rather strict resistance to that kind of change. How do you go about turning that from this is the way it's always been to you have the better way and they should just listen to you?
Beautiful question. I always think there's no such thing as luck. I think you make the most of the opportunities as they're presented to you.
Well put.
And if you're prepared to see them and you're prepared to think creatively and innovatively, you can actually create your own luck. Call it luck, but it's not. So while we were doing these outdoor-based conference sort of activities, my background and my actual interests were still in, art and music. I was still going out to clubs. I was sort of, playing congas in bands and djembe and all these sorts of things as a sort of late 20s, mid-20s guy.
Nice.
And I really wanted to bring that into the corporate world, but the corporate world wasn't doing that at the time. This seems amazing, but nobody was doing drumming back then in the even the early 90s. And so we were really lucky. You probably heard of a company called Microsoft.
I'm aware of them, yes.
Yeah. Well, back then, this is my point. People hadn't.
Right.
Microsoft were in the UK, late 80s, early 90s. I think I knew all the staff by name. There were 26 people. The following year there was 100, following year there was 300, and so on. So Microsoft grew exponentially, and we, as a major supplier to Microsoft, were doing their team building events. We were doing their sort of family fun days. We were doing their Christmas parties. We're doing a whole bunch of stuff with Microsoft. We've got a very good relationship with the HR department there, and they bankrolled my crazy ideas. So every time I said, okay, right, we're going to create the world's largest samba band. We're going to do it on a stage in Ireland. We're going to use Irish dancers. Michael Jackson happened to be playing on the stage today. 2 days later, Michael Jackson was playing. He needed to set up, but we'd booked that arena. So we said, okay, you can set up earlier if we can use your stage. Crazy things were happening.
Awesome.
And it was back in those days, I guess, I'm not saying money was no object, but it was certainly a lot more free flowing. So each year Microsoft would say, okay, what have you got for us next? What have you got for us next? And then other companies like British Airways started jumping on, and they were flying our staff all around the world just to deliver a Beatswork event because, through British Airways, they heard that it was a great way to finish a conference, so high energy. And soon, I would say there was a period in the mid-90s where we didn't have to sell anything. All we did was pick up the phone.
Really?
It was easy as that because we were streets ahead of everybody else. We were doing huge works of art or Beatswork. The story behind that is I do a lot of adventure sports.
Yes.
And ranging from kayaking through to mountain climbing to paragliding. And I actually broke my knee on a cliff paragliding in Wales. And so I had my leg in a cast for, I guess it was a couple of months. And I wanted to paint a work of art I'm good mixing paint, but I'm not so good with the actual draftsmanship of it. Okay. So we projected this Picasso onto a canvas and drew the Picasso that I was then going to make that break from the outdoors conference venue to then starting looking at creativity. And to answer your question, being so closely connected to Microsoft in those early days, they sort of bankrolled, our new development in team building.
Let me ask you real quick, just going back to those early days, how many of you were even there and what were you called?
We've always been called Catalyst.
Okay.
So we started off as Catalyst Event Management. And with event management, that's why we're doing their Christmas parties and their fun days and so on. But then I realized that there were agencies out there who saw us challenging what they were doing. And we wanted those agencies to sell us. And they would only sell us if we could go under their umbrella. So they would promote themselves. And we pretty much had to stop saying, okay, we'll organize the trains, the transport, the buffet, etc. And so we homed in on what we did best, which was team building and team dynamics. And, we all became, I always say the question, how many of us were? I mean, we started off with just myself and the original partner across the kitchen table, a man called Martin Ruby. And there was just two of us. And it was literally two people. One thing I did do, I spoke to my partner about this the other day, is like early on, we had a chairman. And I think for anybody running a business, this is a really good thing to do. Somebody who sits outside the business, who's not on the board of directors, who's trusted by all the directors, somebody who can actually hover above the company. Maybe they've got connections or not, but I think the board listens to the chairman. I think if a company, I'm going off track here a little bit, but if a company grows just within itself without somebody outside actually managing the dynamics of directorship, sure. I think one of the reasons we were successful is because we actually had two very strong chairmen over the process that the company was in the UK.
Very nice. Thanks, Guy. Now bear with me for one quick second. I want to take a break to tell you, my listeners, about the Catalyst Team Building Network, an association of team building providers. With representatives in over 90 countries speaking more than 20 languages, the Catalyst Network is widely regarded as the voice of the team building industry. Network members share resources, best practices, and business opportunities. Catalyst partners are learning from each other and pushing the boundaries of what is possible in team building. Catalyst Network members share a common goal of creating highly relevant, socially responsible, and good valued experiences for their clients. For more information, please visit catalystglobal.com. I want to talk a little bit more with the time we have about now. What's happening with you guys today? First off, how many, as I was just saying, you're in over 90 countries.
Well, we're in 90 countries because certain partners have two territories. So
okay.
Up to three. So some of the African partners might have a license in different territories. I mean, technically we have 52, I think it is, licensed partners. We, in the early days, decided not to run it as a franchise, by which I mean the partner doesn't have to call themselves Catalyst. So right. The Catalyst brand in America is not actually represented by team bonding and play with a purpose. So we have two partners in the States. Obviously we're in Canada. We're all through Africa, Middle East, nearly every country in Europe. And then it might surprise you, but the more profitable, and South America as well, and down through Mexico, Central America, Pacific zone. So New Zealand through Australia, up through Indonesia, into Malaysia, Hong Kong, China, Shanghai, Beijing, India, Pakistan now. Might have missed somebody there, but Japan. So what that's given me is given me a really interesting outlook on team building across the globe. And I think that's the last 10 years we've been building the global network.
Right.
So we became the biggest team building company in the UK. And then I personally left the UK organization and moved into the global network to actually develop the global partnerships and to grow new business through global associations.
And what kind of benefits have you seen from that change, from that growth?
that goes two ways, because what that's given us, it's given us access to some of the cleverest minds in team building around the world. So one of our best and best-selling products right now, called the Infinite Loop, which started off as when you put on the VR glasses, and it's a virtual reality simulation.
Sure.
You do a bunch of stuff. Your other team members are outside the goggles, and then you're inside. That in the last 2 months has had to be transferred into, an online activity, so that it can be played remotely by people, 6 people in different places from anywhere in the world. But in your case, it'd probably be 6 people all sat in the States, and they'd be playing that activity in the same way they would be playing it as if they were at a conference around the table. And we've had to do that very quickly with several of our events. We've had to be very adaptive and agile to change what were face-to-face team building products into activities that could be delivered remotely.
Fantastic, Guy. Now, tell me, how do you handle things like, keeping the team of the network going, even though you're talking about very different social situations? Even taboos.
Yeah. So one of the things it's like pre-COVID and post-COVID. So pre-COVID, we had biannual meetings. So our last amazing meeting was in South Africa, where everybody came together. We took over a safari park in South Africa. There was 110 people from all around the world speaking all different languages, all with one thing in common, is that they were masters of team building and running the team building industry in their territory. So we because we've become successful, we get to pick the cream of the crop. We might have had 5 people approach us from Israel, for example, and we do our due diligence on those companies, and we find out which is the best one to represent us, and we meet up with them. We spend several days getting a mix. To be quite honest, and as I said to the guys in the States, if you can't sit down and have a beer with me, I'm probably not the right person to be. I'm saying I'm not saying I'm going to drink 10 beers.
Sure.
But, I'd love to have a beer with somebody, and I like to have a social engagement with them, so that these people around the world, these 50 partners, have all become amazing friends. I'm one of the luckiest people in the world that I've got an extended friendship network throughout the planet. And pre-COVID, I would travel around the world. So last year I went to Mexico. This year I was all set to go to Chile and Pakistan and visit partners. Face-to-face, I visited nearly all our partners in situ. So that includes places like Kazakhstan and Lithuania and Estonia and countries you've probably never even heard of.
Amazing.
And then so every year we had a meeting. 2 years ago we had this amazing meeting in Africa in a safari park. This year we're all set to go to an amazing hotel outside Dublin. All the partners will come together. In the interim years, the odd number years, we have zone meetings. So we divided the world up into 3 zones. We've got the Americas, running Canada down to Chile. And then we've got the Eurozone, includes Africa and the Middle East, because Dubai is a huge, huge player.
Okay.
And they sort of feed into the Euro. And then we have the Pacific Asia zone that I mentioned. And they have separate meetings. Currently, we're running Zoom meetings weekly for the Eurozone and sort of monthly for the Asia zone. And so we because they have similar issues that they want to deal and talk with. It's become I'm not so saying in a strange sense, but it's almost like a cooperative where when people join, they can't quite get their head around it. Why would I do this or somebody else in the world that I've not actually met? Which is why it's so important that we have these biannual meetings. And I don't get a return. What's my return for it? Well, the return is that when you're in need of something, somebody else will come around and help you. So we have a chat forum that's like, I woke up this morning, there's 60 items have been entered in there overnight where people are saying, we're doing this. And of course, everything right now is based around, we're doing this on Zoom. Which platform can we do this? How can we have breakout rooms? Who's done this with this? And that's where they help themselves. And they actually literally answer each other's questions. So as I was saying to some of the other directors, to some extent, our job is got easier in one respect. We've built up such a knowledge base And obviously it's got harder because we're always having to move forward and
right.
the next thing.
Right. And I love the fact that you're asking your own questions now. I can just sit here and listen to you talk for the next 20 minutes. But I do want to take a brief second just to talk to my team out there about B1G1, which can make your business a real force for good. When you're a part of B1G1, you bring new purpose, meaning, and relevance to your business by making giving a core of what you do. Unlike conventional giving models, B1G1 helps small and medium-sized businesses achieve more social impact by embedding giving activities in their everyday business operations to create unique giving stories. Every business transaction can impact lives from as little as just 1 cent. So please visit b1g1.com to get started. That's B1G1, business for good. Now, Guy, I want to focus a little bit, if we can, just on you. What, for example, right now, what's one of your favorite events that your company offers?
I thought you might ask that. My background, if I take you back to that comment about being an adventurer, so I was in my sort of late 20s and 30s. I explored the world with a kayak. I never made it a professional. I did a lot of video work, because I did communications and things at college. I've done a lot of filming for stuff that ended up on National Geographic.
Nice.
So I was filming at that sort of level, and I was also kayaking at that sort of level.
So you've had a boring life, is what you're saying.
I've had a boring life. I've been to Nepal more than 25 times. I keep kit in Nepal, in Kathmandu. I've been to South America, explored the rivers all through the Andes and so on. And I was doing it at that time when it was just a joy to travel. We didn't have these long lines at airports. We'd rock up with a kayak. Everybody would wonder who the hell we are and what we were doing. We'd get into countries. People were just amazed. They hadn't seen kayaks. When you're doing first descents of rivers in the Himalayas, local people haven't even seen a kayak before.
Yeah.
And so I created, on the background of that, a lot of my friends were getting into professional river running, and rafting companies were coming up. We did a great activity called River Runner, where each team is a rafting company who are about to run down a river for the first time, and they how many safety kayakers do they take? What's their budget? It's a complicated game. There's 10. You need 8 people to play the activity, because there's 8 sets of information that each person becomes a specialist in something. So like the weather forecast, or communications with the radio, planning their route down the river, where they get on, where they get off, how they deal with a hippo attack. All these things that I had experienced on. I was attacked by a hippo on the White Nile in Uganda. And
when are you going to write your book, Guy?
Yeah, a few people have said that. Yeah. But I guess it's not. I'm hoping it's not over yet. So
good.
Probably another half a dozen years left. Working.
I'll ghostwrite it for you. We'll just do a lot more interviews.
Yeah. So River Runner, because of my experience in running rivers, would be a favorite. After running rivers, I started paragliding and then climbing mountains. So I've climbed several Himalayan peaks with all the ice axes and crampons. And there, climbing mountains, you see another team dynamic. You see the whole Everest thing where people are paying and so on.
Yeah.
So we then created a really, really nice game that's actually an app called Peak Performance. So in this one, you climb a mountain in a room. The mountains are, at the front of the room. You can see it on a screen, and you can see where the other teams are. They have to go through the ice fall. They have to make numerous decisions. They get movement choices. They get to choose how many guides they take, how much oxygen they need. They need to understand the effects of altitude, predict the weather patterns, so they can work their way when's the best time to make an ascent on the peak. Nobody dies in this game. People
That's
just
good.
sort of they get helicoptered off, rescued, but there's a cost to that, as you can imagine. And so you got things like Peak Performance. You got River Runner. The fact that I was the first person to bring the big picture, create that after my own paragliding accident. When I was younger, and I'm interested in going into to clubs and nightclubs. I love that whole music scene. That's when I came along with the idea of Beats Work, which is our samba event. So the samba, that's actually a story in itself. So we were doing an event for Microsoft, and I think they'd reached numbers of about 600 in the UK. and loads of money. And they said, "Oh, can you do that?" So the problem we've got at the moment is sales and marketing are sort of head to head against each other. They're sort of, the salespeople are doing one thing, marketing is doing another. And of course, you've got a bunch of directors that are sort of hovering above all this. We need to do an activity that's going to replicate a company in some way and actually highlight the differences and yet bring them together.
Right.
So I was thinking, I can remember thinking American football, gridiron, and I was thinking like, yeah, that's you got specialists that cover certain positions and do certain things. I was thinking, well, I can't have Microsoft people playing American football. That's not going to happen. Well, what else is a big team with differences in it that's coordinated by somebody? So that's why I had the idea of an orchestra. And I thought, I know, we could do an orchestra. So I convinced Microsoft that we would book the Royal Albert Hall, which is the biggest venue in London. You probably know it. Amazing building.
Yes.
I said, look, we'll book the Albert Hall and we'll put an orchestra down the front. And then your people will be in that orchestra. And when they've got to present, they'll stand up from within the cellos. And the guy from the marketing will be in the cellos. There we go. Wow, we didn't know he was there. And then he would do his piece and the screen would be behind. Then he'd sit back down. The orchestra would play more. And then somebody would stand up from, the horn section and they were in sales. Anyway, at that point, it was when Microsoft restructured and wanted to move a lot more emphasis to being based in Ireland, Dublin. I think there were some good tax reasons for doing that by all accounts.
Yep.
So they said, guys, we're moving. We're not having the conference in London. We're going to do it in Dublin. But we want to do the same thing. I said, no, it's not going to work in Dublin. We don't have the Royal Albert Hall.
Right.
And I can't get the orchestra in the same way. I can't. So I was thinking, okay, what's like an orchestra now? And it's not an American football team. And I was driving down the motorway. I can remember exactly where I was on the M6, and I saw a sign that's turned off. And I was thinking, like, that's interesting because that sign's, I'm not turning off where that sign is. That sign is telling me that the turn off is coming up. This was going through my mind. And on the radio, there was some samba music. And I was listening to this samba music and I could hear this whistle. And the whistle was controlling the instruments, controlling these people who were probably walking most of the time when they were playing.
Sure.
And I thought the whistle is like the sign on the motorway. I don't do my thing when the whistle blows. The whistle blows and it says, in a count of 4, we're going to change. And in the motorway, I change when when the deviation comes up, not on the sign. This whole thing was all coming together in my head, and I went, samba music, that's it. We're going to do samba music instead. So I went to see the London School of Samba, head of, and I said, how long does it take to teach samba? And he said, about 2 years. Okay, I don't want to talk to you. I'll go to Liverpool. I went to Liverpool head of samba. And how long does it take to learn samba? Same answer, 2 years. Same answer from Manchester, 2 years. And I went to a party and there was a drummer at the party. And in the break, I talked to the drummer who happened to work with special needs kids and through his school system. And I said to him, could you teach anybody to play samba? How long would it take? And he said, I could teach you samba in about 2 hours. I said, right, you're the man I need. But I need the credibility of the other 3. Right. So I had a meeting with the head of the London, Manchester, and Liverpool schools of samba, who were actually at loggerheads because they competed against each other. London was better than Manchester, was better than Liverpool. Got them all 3 together in the same room. I got this, what they call a peripatetic music teacher in the room with them. And I said, okay, we are going to teach a bunch of people who have never touched a samba instrument to play samba in 2 hours. So they were saying it's not possible. I said, yes, it is. Listen to him. He's just told me it is. And so we had this thing. And so they were being totally purist about it. They were saying, like, pure samba. Okay, you probably can't be, but you can get close to it. So then we look at the 8 instruments that made up a samba band. We broke those down. We worked out how you could clap out all the things first. People don't touch instruments for the first 20 minutes. And we had a whole process. And then that's how that led to us doing samba music on the Michael Jackson stage in Ireland in whatever year it was.
That's amazing.
And that from then on was that massive period where we didn't have to sell anything because it was just the best. And it still is. I mean, it's incredible because now what you get 30 people working together that come together. So you end up with any multiples of 30. So it could be 300 or 600 or 1,000 people, and they all come back together and they play as one big unit.
Cool. Very nice. So let me ask you though, especially being as big as you are in the adventuring, and I know it's probably been a while since you've been in front of a group yourself. What does a man like you go in for say like an icebreaker or an energizer?
Well, the funny thing is, right now we've been having to do them on Zoom meetings. So I did an icebreaker the other day. It works really well. It's quite a visual, obviously, because you're on a Zoom meeting. So I'll explain it to you. But for the listeners, whether they'll actually grasp it. But if you take your hand and make the OK sign and hold it out in front of you, so there's a ring, and if you look through that ring, and then my nose, as you're looking at me, is in the middle of that ring, you then cover up your left eye, and about 75% of people will still be able to see me through that ring, through the ring, because they'll be looking through their right eye through the ring at me.
Right.
And that's because they're right eye dominant.
Right.
Because their left brain is controlling the right eye, and the right eye dominant is an indication that they're sort of reasonably methodical, more analytical. And if the ones that don't see me are the ones that are left eye dominant, because you'll try it later on. The ones that don't see me are left eye dominant. They're controlled by the right hand side of the brain, and they're the creative ones. And so that little icebreaker is actually intriguing because people learn something about each other. It's very odd that you can't see suddenly when you just cover up one eye and you're looking through a ring. You're only at arm's length away, so you're about 2 feet from your own eye, and that's the difference between the eyes. So that, as an icebreaker, I like that because and you can develop that. So you can say, okay, what does left brain, right brain mean? You can play around with that. You can make that quite fun. On the Zoom meetings, of course, you can get people to stand up. Okay, who was left eye dominant? Okay, look, we can see who the creative people are amongst us.
So you got a lot of nice science going on behind all these things.
I like the science. I did a lot of work with neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP. Started in California, I believe, back in the 70s. And most of my staff, when I was in the UK, I would pay for them to go on an NLP course because I believed it was a really good way of getting empathy. And when it's used maliciously, it's by salespeople to sell us stuff we don't want. But when it's used with integrity, it's actually a very interesting way of improving communication skills. So for example, people have different preferred representation systems. So I see what you mean. I see what you mean is what I would say. Not I hear what you're saying.
Sure.
So I see because I'm visually orientated. I love visual stuff. Whether you can gather that, if the people on the thing can't see, but I've got a fist full of global rings, people from around the world. I've got chunky jewelry on and so on and stuff but every piece is a genuine piece. I can tell you where this came from in Pakistan. This piece came from here. And when I'm traveling, I find it really nice to engage with people, and they go like, "Well, where did that ring come from?" And then there's a whole story behind that, and so on. So yeah, I'm a very visual person. And if you want to communicate to me, you need to communicate in visual language. You need to paint a picture for me. So if you're a salesman, you need to sell what it's going to look like.
Right.
For other people, you might be selling what it sounds like, and then the kinesthetic, you might be selling what it feels like.
Very nice. So trying to help people find out where they come from, where their point of reference is. That's awesome.
That's it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, Guy, we're almost at the point where we're going to wrap up now. I could talk to you for hours just listening to your story. But right now, I do have something that I like to do for my audience here, my team, where we get into the rapid fire questions. We're going to do our speed round, which is going to be 60 seconds on the clock. Your objective is just to answer every question you can, as short and simple and fast as you can. See how many answers you get. All right? Ready?
Yep.
Here we go. 60 seconds on the clock. Tell us your name.
Guy Baker.
Do you have any pets?
I do not have any pets.
If you could ask a dog any question that it would answer, what would you like it to be?
How fast he could run away from a bigger dog.
What's the most courageous thing you think you've ever done?
Saved 3 people's lives on a river in France.
You are coming back on answering a lot more questions. Okay, who would you like to play you in the movie of your life?
DiCaprio.
If you could live anywhere in the universe, where would you like it to be?
Right where I am.
Very nice. Your favorite vacation spot?
Lombok, Indonesia.
What's your favorite nickname for yourself?
Weedo.
Very good. Right under the wire. Thanks, Weedo. That's awesome. Guy, I cannot thank you enough for coming on. You have been an absolute wonder. I've just enjoyed talking to you. And seriously, I would love you to be able to come back at some point, because I think we can just go on and on and on about all this, how you built this, how you maintain it, just in that. But that's going to be it for this episode of Team Building Around the World. If you like this show, please share it with your friends or a colleague. We'd be grateful if you would subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And remember to leave us a favorable review. If you didn't like the show, you could just shut up about it. It's totally fine. All past episodes can be found at teambonding.com. So that's it for me, guys. I have been Rich Riddensland. This has been Team Building Around the World. And remember, if you're within the sound of my voice, you're now on my team, and I'm on yours. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
It's been said that you learn more about a person in an hour of play than in a year of conversation. So why not put your coworkers to play with the help of the team at Team Bonding? Team Bonding was founded over 20 years ago with one simple question. How can employees have a great time while fostering strong, authentic bonds between people who work together? Their catalog of innovative events includes scavenger hunts, Jeopardy, and much more. Each activity, whether live, virtual, or hybrid, maximizes the impact of team building with an accent on fun. Visit teambonding.com to schedule your event now. Team Bonding, when you want seriously fun results.